We're Richard and Jackie from Early Retirement Wanderlust.
And we just got back from a 5-week road trip around the Rocky Mountains in the United States.
And we wanted to share with you some of our favourite places, experiences and surprises that we've had along the journey. So as I said, we've just got back from an amazing 5-week trip through the Rocky Mountains of the USA. The story behind the trip is that we went with my mother, who is on a mission to visit the 50 states of America. She had already done 40 and she had earmarked 4 or 5 that she thought we could have a really good time visiting in an RV that weren't quite so easy for her to fly into. So that was it. We set off on our trip.
And 5 weeks later, we're here, having survived the experience of a RV rental in the US. We visited 6 states in total, 4 of which came off Iris's bucket list. We travelled over 4,500 miles, and it's fair to say it was just a truly epic trip.
So we've sat down and had a really good think about what our reflections were on the trip, and we've split it into 3 things. Some of our absolute favourite places that we visited, some of the amazing experiences that we've had, and there were some surprises along the way.
So sit back, join us, and we'll start with some of our favourite places from the trip. So the first place we absolutely loved, and it was actually the first place that we went to, was the Grand Tetons National Park. It was our first national park on this trip, and we've done some national parks previously, so we had a little bit of expectation, but the Tetons was just unbelievable.
It was basically the landscape of it. It's based around the Teton Mountains, and wherever you were in the national park, that was the overriding view that you had. But the photographic opportunities and the stunningness of the vistas that we saw, I just can't even put into words.
Yeah, it was a point that really allowed me to re-find my love of photography with the DSLR camera, and no matter where you went in the Tetons, there was always something to photograph, and no matter what time you went as well. So we had some amazing times watching the sunrise and then all the way through the day to watching the sunset. A truly beautiful and very understated national park.
It also helped that one of the campsites in that national park, at a place called Coulter Bay, had a resident grizzly bear with her 2 cubs, and there was always this little sort of feeling that you never knew whether you'd see this bear coming out of the woodlands or not. And it was a beautiful campsite based on Jackson Lake.
Jackie had feelings about that. I had fears about that, but that's a different story.
We didn't see the bears, but 3 mule deer did come trotting past the campervan. Yellowstone was on all 3 of our bucket lists. Mum was desperate to go because she wanted to visit Old Faithful, and just the epicness of saying that we've been to Yellowstone was on my bucket list.
The first national park in the US, and pretty much beyond belief.
We always knew the wildlife in Yellowstone would be epic. We came across a huge roadblock of the buffalo. We saw coyotes on our first day there, so many different kinds of deer. But the thing that really surprised me was the prolificness of all the different kinds of hot springs and geysers.
Yeah, the geothermal activity. You can read about it, you can see it on TV, but until it's actually bubbling within touching distance from you, or you're actually seeing boiling water coming up out of the ground, it's a bit of a head fry moment, really. And you know, we're educated people, but yeah, there was a definite wow factor.
I think it's kind of the variety of how different they all looked, from the Old Faithful, which was shooting feet into the air, but there was also things like the Grand Prismatic Hot Springs, where the vividness of the colours of this hot spring, when you looked at it from above, looked otherworldly. One of the next favourite places that we had is probably a big surprise to us. It was the Black Hills of South Dakota. Beyond knowing that we were going to go and visit Mount Rushmore, which is epic in itself, just being there in this place that I have seen in so many films and in so many photos, that was pretty much a huge wow factor. But there was so much more there that we didn't even know about.
Yeah, we really enjoyed the Crazy Horse Monument,
Yeah.
which was like Rushmore but on steroids, and I think it's little known compared to Rushmore, but wow, one man's mission to carve Crazy Horse into a mountain or carve Crazy Horse out of a mountain. It was, yeah.
Yeah, it's a carving that's actually still in progress, whereas Mount Rushmore is completely finished. This has been going for 70 years, and at the moment, all they've carved is his face, and they've still got all of the horse to carve out. They say it's going to be at least another 50 years before it's finished, and that's with all the new modern technology.
And then in sharp contrast, South Dakota was also fantastic for wildlife, and we didn't have to venture into a national park, but we went into a state park.
Custer State Park was beautiful. It's not one of the national parks, although it's very similar to a lot of them. It's got a huge, huge herd of bison, and we were really lucky when we were there. At the end of September, I think it is, they collect all of the bison from across the whole of the park, herd them into the ranch and check them all. So we got there the week later when they were all still hanging around the ranch, and there were hundreds of them.
And then similar memories that last a lifetime, only on a smaller scale. Prairie dogs.
Prairie dogs. Who doesn't love a prairie dog? They are the most gorgeous little creatures. There's thousands of them, and they live in little things called, well, huge things called towns. And you can see these little lumps of sand, almost like moles. But they come and they stand up like this, and they squeak at each other when they're in mornings. They're just so cute.
I'm pretty sure the farmers consider them as vermin, and I'm pretty sure that they breed way more prolifically than rabbits. But yeah, as an experience to watch them, no one can go past a prairie dog town without smiling. For me as a driver, South Dakota was really easy. It doesn't get a massive amount of good press, and yet in such a small area, there are so many different things that you can visit and so many different experiences that you can have. And we had just a really good time in South Dakota.
We did. We actually stayed in South Dakota longer than anywhere else, because another place that we haven't mentioned yet was the Badlands National Park.
As a national park, I've not seen geography quite like it. It is absolutely unique. It is lunar-esque. It's very, very strange to describe, and it just seemingly goes on forever.
Elements of it were like the Grand Canyon, because you're standing on the sort of prairies and it goes down. The colours of the rocks, they ranged from like a marbled grey with red streaks through them. You'd drive another 5 miles and they would change to almost a vivid yellow and purple colour, and then drive another 5 miles and they were bright red rock canyons. It was stunning. In South Dakota, Mum actually left us at that point because she was flying to go and visit 2 more states that were on her bucket list, and we drove back down to Colorado, and we didn't really know what to expect from Colorado, and we spent 2 weeks exploring it, and I think we could have spent another 6. There were just so many beautiful, stunning places. So we've tried to narrow down what it was that we've liked about Colorado.
One of the things I wanted to get out of the trip was to genuinely find small town America. And Colorado is full of so many small towns, and they are so welcoming and so unique and fulfilled everything that I probably wanted from the trip. One of our favourite places was Salida.
Yeah, Salida, very, very laid back town. We caught it at the end of all the fall colours, which does really help, because walking along the river, there was just these bright yellow trees surrounding it that were reflecting off the water. There was a real sort of almost a hippie vibe, a very laid back vibe to it, based around the river crafts and river floatings.
And then if you take the hippie vibe up a few more notches, you end up in Leadville, and that's a place where I wanted to go because it hosts an iconic mountain bike and trail running race, the Leadville 100. Wow, what a place. Ex-gold mining town. It's almost as if time stood still, and such a laid-back community, but so welcoming and so friendly, and it's absolutely in the middle of nowhere.
We did have to laugh. We wanted to go to one of the bike shops, and there's just a sign on the door saying, YOLO, gone hiking, the weather's good, shop's quiet, see you in a month. It was like that summed up Leadville.
So then again, in sharp contrast to Leadville, we had the ski resorts, and they were just starting to wake up, and we were advised by a local to go to Aspen because everyone who goes to Colorado must experience Aspen at least once in their life. And what an experience it was.
Yeah, it's just like it was the opposite to Leadville. It was a very polished town. It was a very nice town. The fall colours were out again, so it was very, very pretty. The local that advised us to go there said, you must go to the Jerome Hotel and you must have a beer in there. The most expensive beer we have ever bought. It was $32 for 2 beers. Luckily, we were forewarned, so we knew that it was going to be expensive. But just the experience of sitting in this sort of millionaire's hotel, it was great.
Yeah, and some locals we met at the airport towards the end of our trip, they lived in Vale, and they summed it up and said, Vale is for the millionaires, Aspen is for the billionaires.
You could tell it was posh. It had all of the designer shops lining the street. We couldn't find one tack shop to see if we could find some nice sweatshirts.
And full of very polished people. So, as you can imagine, we fitted right in there after living 4 weeks in a van.
We lived the high life for an hour. My personal favourite place in Colorado was when we stayed on a campground called Peaceful Valley. It was on the Peak to Peak Highway. We'd come from the Rocky Mountain National Park and we were going down to visit all of the different ski areas to see what they were like in the summer. And we just came across this campground. It was cash only. It was dead. I think there was 4 of us staying for the night, but you were greeted with a bright orange sign as you drove through saying there was a resident bear to be careful at night.
And we stayed on this deserted campsite in the middle of nowhere with pretty much no facilities apart from pit toilets. And we just had one of the best nights because we went for a walk up to a lake at sunset in the hope of seeing moose, and then on our way back,
yeah, Richard had disappeared down the path and I could hear something rustling in the bushes, and when I turned round there was the most enormous moose, sort of just in a little gladed forest. She was magnificent. And then we left her and we were going back down to the campsite and there was the most vivid sunset that I've ever seen. It was just one of them nights, wasn't it?
yeah.
The clear night skies with the bright stars. It was just the most gorgeous night.
And you don't have to spend lots of money to get experiences like that. That campsite was $25, cash in an envelope, dump it into a secure box, and we just had the best night.
Being van lifers in the UK, we do know the importance of, when you're on the campgrounds, just speaking and listening to the different people that you meet, because they've all got such vast experiences that they share with us and places and tip-offs of things that we can do.
Being in a Cruise America van really helped because everyone knew that we were either tourists or foreigners, and as soon as they heard our English accents as well, most Americans are really, really keen to chat and they're really proud about their country, and they've always got tip-offs of must-do places to see and go to.
Yeah, we've just met some really, really fascinating people and it just adds to the enjoyment of the trip. We had a great night one night on a campsite where we bumped into a couple called Randy and Shari. They were driving one of the hugest RVs I've ever seen. And Randy was ace. He asked us if we wanted to come in and have a look around. It was the most luxurious thing I've ever seen.
And then on the Continental Divide, I bumped into a hiker who is an iconic through hiker in the US. He's done so many epic trails. He was walking the Continental Divide, which is 3,500 miles from Canada down to Mexico. And those people that you meet on the trail, you will remember that, and I'll remember meeting Hippie for many years to come.
One of the things that we found probably a little bit later in the trip than was useful to us was these forest campsites, government rec campsites.
Yeah, they were at the cheaper end of the camping market, but they were definitely our sort of place. They tended to be in the middle of forests, they tended to have basic facilities, they tended to be cheap, and for us, in our eyes, they were some of the most beautiful places that we stayed.
Sadly, a lot of them were closed by the time we got there because we were out of season and obviously at really high altitude. But we had some amazing nights on some of those forest campgrounds.
There were so many nights where we just sat out and looked up, and the vastness of the night sky was quite incredible.
We could even see the Milky Way went on a couple of the campgrounds because they're so desolate that there's no light pollution. We have definitely found a true love for the national parks in America. They are generally set in the most stunning of locations. I think we visited 4 or 5 on this trip.
Yeah, and they do their national parks really, really well. So we bought an annual pass, which was $80 for the year, and we could go into any national park. And in the end, we were looking for more national parks to go to because they're really accessible, as Jackie said, are stunning in terms of either their wildlife or their geography. And the Americans do the national park experience really, really well.
Yeah, we were lucky that we just about caught them all with the campgrounds still open, so we were able to stay in most of the national parks as well, which over the winter in the Rockies they closed down.
And then linked to the national parks, but you can't actually use your pass, is a whole series of other parks. So everywhere you go in the Rockies, there's seemingly a national forest, and we couldn't really understand that structure. And then there's state parks as well, which again are protected areas that are set up for tourism, and they're just beautiful places.
We visited 2 or 3 really, really gorgeous state parks. We had a nice day near Fort Collins where we hiked around the Lorry State Park.
And not forgetting Custer State Park with all its wildlife. And then again, when we were back down in Colorado Springs,
we visited the Garden of the Gods, which was a state park that had been donated by a family, I think, so it couldn't be touched or built on, just with these huge red rock monoliths. And it was really close to the town centre, the city centre.
one of the benefits of having an RV was being able to get off the beaten track. And we've already talked about my love of backcountry America and small town America, but we genuinely felt that we got off the tourist route and found small towns. Prime example being Bowman in North Dakota.
Yeah, Bowman was just an epic experience for all 3 of us. Mum loved it as well. It started by us turning up at the campground and we were the only people there, and it just had the most beautiful sunset. And then we went for a meal at the Silver Dollar Saloon, which was almost like a speakeasy. You kind of opened the door and then it opened up into this great big saloon, and it was rodeo weekend, high school rodeo weekend, so it was full of proper American cowboys.
Yeah, and in the end, they were really, really welcoming. But walking through that door, it was like everything stopped and everyone looked at us. And it was like, who are these 3 strange English people coming into our saloon? But what a place.
Yeah.
And then on the Sunday morning, the saloon was shut for breakfast because the firehouse in the town was doing a charitable pancake and sausage breakfast.
What really struck us about that is the town has only got a population of about 200 or 300, but the firehouse had probably all 200 or 300 people in there, and the town is at least an hour, 2 hours drive to anywhere else remotely with any other people. And it showed what a community that they needed to be, and it was lovely. They were really welcoming. We had a great breakfast, and just lots of little things about Bowman that just added up to us having a fab night.
Prior to starting the trip, I was a little bit anxious about driving such a large RV, but for me, one of the big experiences of the holiday was the driving experience and driving some epic mountain passes.
Someone had said to us, you need to go to Aspen, visit the Jerome Hotel, have your beer, which we did. And then they also said, but you must drive it from Leadville going over Independence Pass. And it goes up to over 12,000 feet, snow-capped at the top of it. Luckily, we drove through on a really clear day and it had been good weather, so we were okay. It did actually close about 3 days after we drove over it, didn't it?
When you go past repeated warning signs of vehicles over 35 feet, turn back now. Luckily, we were 25 feet. It was actually such a lovely drive on the way up. It was wide, it was spacious. Granted, there was the soft shoulders and big drops, but it was okay.
Was it like that on the way down?
The only sketchy bit was on the way down, where it got a little bit tight at 2 or 3 occasions. And to be fair, if we'd have met anyone, we would have been in trouble because I was not reversing that RV.
Over the 5 weeks that we were in the USA, there were certainly some surprises on the trip. The biggest one for me being the elevation that we were at for the whole entirety of our trip. We started in Denver, which I kind of should have known. It's called the Mile High City, and it's at over 5,000 feet of elevation, which is actually higher than any mountain in England.
And then from Denver, everything goes up. So Denver feels like it's really low. It's not, it's mile high. So we spent the full 5 weeks at elevation, and it did affect us.
Yeah, there were some nights where we were sleeping at 9,000 feet elevation, which is over 3,000 metres, and we could generally feel it just in our breathing, trying to do things, certainly for the first few weeks.
And then also to do with geography, it's an easy thing to say. It's a big old country. But until you've experienced it, you just got no idea of the distances or the remoteness of some of the places in that Western Rockies.
And we'd look at Google Maps and say, right, we need to go from here to here. And normally in our VW van in England, it'd say like to get from here to Scotland is 6 hours. And we knew, unless there was bad traffic, it would only be 6 hours. But in the big old Cruise America van, when it said 6 hours, you knew that was also actually going to be about 9 hours in the camper van.
And some of the roads are just so impressive. And we've got some footage of us literally driving for hours and hours and hours on roads that do not move, with nothing to see, nothing changes, but that vastness just is, it's quite an awe-inspiring moment when you think about what a tiny little speck we are on this massive planet.
Yeah. Our trip was in mid-September and October, and we were quite surprised by the range of the temperatures that we had in the day, particularly when we were in places like Yellowstone. It would go down to -2 in the night, and you'd wake up literally freezing in the morning. It was really cold. But then by 11 o'clock lunchtime, you were hiking in shorts and a vest top because the temperatures were 20 degrees in the day. Quite a bizarre range of temperatures.
And I think that was probably to do with the elevation as well. So one of the benefits of that is that we were in fall season, and depending on what elevation we were at, the fall colours were different. So it felt like the fall colours were lasting for longer and longer and longer. Another natural phenomenon that I think I was a little bit too shell-shocked to experience was on the first day's evening drive, the Northern Lights.
Yeah, we were driving over Medicine Butte Pass. We were on one of those trips where Google said it was going to be an hour and a half, and we were 4 hours into the trip because we hadn't accounted for the fact it was up a big mountain pass. But as we dropped down the other side, the sky literally danced and turned purple in front of us. You could see it with the naked eye, and when you got the camera on it as well, the colours were so vivid. I've never seen the Northern Lights before, and I couldn't believe we could see them with our naked eye.
It was a very strange experience driving off the top of this mountain pass. At one point I thought I was hallucinating because it was like, this cannot be happening. The sky is purple and it's the middle of the night. Surely it must be jet lag.
When we were at Yellowstone, we didn't see any bears, so we decided we would go and visit a place called the Wolf and Grizzly Bear Centre, which is in West Yellowstone, to fundraise so that they can afford to keep the animals there. One of the things that they do is get the bears to test out cooler products. So when we were there, this fierce female grizzly bear was trying her hardest to get into a cool box that was filled with some of her favourite treats. She was jumping on it, she was ripping at it with her claws, she was slamming it into sides of the lake, and she didn't get into it, but it was so awesome watching how they actually tested it.
Awesome and scary at the same time. There is no way that I am sleeping out under canvas anywhere where those creatures are, because to watch how creative she was and yet at the same time how strong and powerful she was pretty scary.
Still on a wildlife note, we did come across a few roadblocks.
To see nature actually take control of modern life was lovely in the parks. And a couple of times in Yellowstone, we were involved in traffic jams where there was one epic one where a buffalo herd just decided that they were going to cross the road, and they were going to cross the road in their own time, despite the attention of the park rangers.
Yeah, the park ranger had got his sirens on. He was trying to gently nudge this huge bull bison off the road, and the bison was just nudging him back as if to say, I'm not going anywhere. It was comedic to watch from a distance, but I'm glad we weren't the first RV in that queue.
And then in Mammoth Hot Springs, it was rutting season, and a very large bull elk has decided that he was going to keep his harem of cows in town. So they were just wandering around causing chaos as the bull elk was honking away.
When we were in the Rocky Mountain National Park, we were driving out in the depths of the night. It was about 8 or 9 o'clock at night. It was really, really dark, and we came across a herd of elk that were crossing the road. It was the hugest herd I have ever seen. There must have been at least 60 creatures. So I think we've probably rambled on quite a bit, but we have had such a wide range of experiences and places that we visited that we just wanted to share with you some of the best bits.
Yeah, we hope you've enjoyed our documenting of our travels during the last 5 weeks. Part of that process for us is making sure that we've got a record of our travels and our memories and the experiences that we built up, because it's been amazing.
And if you're ever questioning whether you should have a go at an RV road trip in the Rocky Mountains, absolutely. It was just perfect.
So that's it. See you later.
Bye.